Welcome and good evening. My name is Professor Hannah Khan, and we are here tonight for our workshop that is entitled We're So Back, How to Start the Subterm Strong. I am really excited to dive into the various resources and strategies that are available to you as an LBC student that will help you manage your time well, accomplish your writing goals, and stay on top of your goals this semester. So I will begin with the word of prayer. Heavenly Father, Lord, I thank you for the opportunity to meet together tonight and to just review this information. Lord, I thank you for the resources that are available, and I just thank you for the gift of writing and learning. And I pray, Lord, that we would do all of these things to your honor and glory. In Jesus' name, amen. So, welcome. I'm so glad that you have joined us tonight. You are in the right place if you are feeling rusty or overwhelmed about the start of this new subterm. If you're looking forward to this fresh start, if you're trying to rebuild momentum that you've had in a previous term, if you're juggling school assignments with work, family, and ministry responsibilities, all of the above or none of the above, you're in the right place because these tools and strategies are here to help support you in your academic goals and learning goals here at LBC. So today, throughout our entire workshop, we are really going to be focusing on this idea of progress over perfection. So none of us are perfect. None of us are attaining perfection on this side of eternity. And so our goal really is progress. It's growth. It's building momentum and continuing to build and establish helpful, useful, effective habits and strategies that support us in our assignment completion, in writing, in research. And so that is going to be the focus of our workshop today. So I want to begin with a little bit of an icebreaker activity. And I'd like to ask you the question in one word, how are you feeling about this new subterm? So take a second, and then when you're ready, feel free to share what your word would be. If you had to describe how you're feeling at the start of this new subterm in one word, what would that one word be? Excited. Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Ethan. That's super exciting. Yes, the start of a new subterm and also even a whole new calendar year is a really great time to just have those feelings of excitement, of renewal, and just excited to dive in and learn. That's wonderful. So, when we're thinking about goals, when we're thinking about writing and academic success, we really want to get to the bottom of what actually contributes to academic success. We say it, and it's a great term, it's a great idea, but what does it actually look like in practicality? And how do we get there? And tonight we're really focusing on how we get there. So we get there through effective planning. And what this means is sticking to and adapting our plans. So we want to create plans, but we don't want to be so rigid that we can't adapt and change and modify as needed. And we're also going to be continuously reevaluating that plan. So we all have different seasons in our life, different responsibilities, even term to term, our life circumstances, our job responsibilities, ministry commitments. Those things could change a little bit or drastically. And so we want to be adaptable and know that, okay, in my current season, this is what my time management needs to look like. In a different season, that looked differently, but now these are my current circumstances, and I need to plan around my current responsibilities and make sure that I have time to prioritize all of my priorities. We also want to know ourselves. We want to know our own strengths and weaknesses. So, do we work better and study better in the mornings, or are we more of an evening uh, night owl kind of worker or student? We also need to know our weaknesses. So when it comes to blocking out time to study, do we want to study for a 90-minute session and just block out that time and dive into deep work? Or do we do better with 25-minute work sessions followed by a 5-minute break? Is that helpful for you? Or would maybe that 5-minute break be an opportunity to get distracted? It depends on how we work best and knowing ourselves and knowing what works best. And then finally, we really want to live in community. We were designed as relational beings, and so it's really important that we're investing in our friendships and our family and our church communities and church families, and that we are having accountability and also just friendship and joy and fun in our lives as well, because life is not all just work. We also have Sabbath rest and we have play, and there are so many good things that God has given us to enjoy, and we need to take the time to prioritize doing those things and doing creative endeavors and hobbies that are enjoyable for us to balance out our work lives as well. So that transitions really well into my next point. So we really need to understand how to prioritize balance and margin. So we don't want to be cramming our schedules so full that our schedules and our calendars are bursting at the seams. We want to make sure that we are working hard, of course, and being good stewards of the gifts, the time, the resources that God has given us, but that we're also taking time to play and enjoy hobbies and get outside and exercise, all of these really good, important things. And that, of course, that we are taking time to have Sabbath rest on a weekly basis and also having a growth mindset. When it comes to academic success, it's really easy to have what's known as a fixed mindset. And that's where if a student feels that he or she isn't good at math, they might say something like, "Oh, well, I've never been good at math. I can't do math. I'm just not very good at math." Whereas having a growth mindset is shifting those thoughts and those thought patterns to, I just need more practice, or I can improve with time, or I don't know how to do that particular mathematical equation yet, but I'm working on it. That totally reframes and reorients our perspective to one of growth and development and change. And that whole framework is from the work of Carol Dweck, who is a Stanford psychologist. So she came up with that idea of a growth mindset. Okay, when it comes to our perspective and our approach of the subterm, we want to identify common myths, common misconceptions about our studies and our time as a student. Um, we might believe the lie that I need to manage my time perfectly. Well, that's a myth because no one perfectly manages their time at all times. Excuse me. We really need to prioritize having systems and rhythms and routines that are sustainable and that we can adapt and get back on course when a day doesn't go perfectly according to plan. We might believe the myth, if I were disciplined, this would be easy. Well, even with discipline and with time management, being a student is no cakewalk. It takes time, it takes effort, and it's not just going to be easy. There's going to be challenges along the way, but with helpful systems in place, those challenges can be mitigated. I should already be doing more. It's easy week one to see the assignments, see what's upcoming, and maybe feel like, oh, I already need to be doing X, Y, and Z. Well, we want to take inventory of all the things that we have to do, make a plan, and move ahead accordingly. So we want to reframe our thoughts and our framework and really think about how consistency yields better results than intensity. So we don't want to just, oh, I just need to write this entire paper in one weekend. Well, what if we spread that out over the course of multiple weeks? That's really going to help us not be so overwhelmed. We also have to remember that writing is a practice that takes time and diligence. It's not something that just happens or just comes together. It takes time, it takes effort, showing up again. We also want to create a plan and adapt as needed, as we've been talking about throughout this workshop. So I want to take a minute to look back on previous subterms and think and reflect, okay, what worked well last subterm and what didn't and why? So take a minute to just reflect back on last subterm. What worked well in terms of your study habits, time management, writing, and what didn't work so well and why? And once you've had time to walk through those, then write down one habit that you'd like to keep and one habit that you'd like to leave behind and release and not carry with you into this next subterm. So just take a minute. What worked well? What didn't? And what would you like to keep doing? And what would you like to stop doing or change? And then if you'd like to share, that would be great. Feel free to unmute if you'd like. Thanks for that question, Ethan.
So, um, this is my first semester. So for me, it would be things. I'm doing this from a perspective of previous study I've done,
Mhm.
and now. I think one habit to keep, for me is just making sure like my study time is my study time, and so
Mhm.
that I continue to like block out 2 hours,
Mhm.
and or maybe an hour and just get the work done. For
Great.
me, if I put myself in one space at one time, it works better. One habit to release, I would say, is less spontaneity when it comes to
Mhm.
when them blocks are actually being
Okay.
taken up. So sometimes like I'll see how I'm doing throughout the day and when to do it, whereas maybe it's like planning a week ahead of when them blocks are, so I'm not leaving it too late.
Excellent. Thanks so much for sharing and welcome. Welcome. Thanks for sharing those habits. That's a great, what you shared was wonderful. Keeping the habit of protecting that dedicated study time and then wanting to be more consistent in scheduling that study time ahead of time in advance. So great. Thanks so much for sharing. So tonight, one of the time management resources that we're going to be talking about is called the Ideal Week Calendar. And this is personally one of my favorite time management resources. And what it is it's a template of your week with time blocks for each hour of the waking day. So what you do is you take inventory of your week, of what hours am I at work, what hours am I at church, or do I have other priorities and commitments? And you fill that out. And then you plan out exactly where you're going to block out study time. So, knowing my schedule, knowing what works best for me, I can plan accordingly to what would help me accomplish my schoolwork in a timely, proactive fashion. So it helps you to live within your limits and allocate your time accordingly because time is a limited resource. And so it helps us to really prioritize our priorities. So we create time blocks of weekly tasks, schoolwork, life responsibilities, And something else that's helpful to keep in mind is before the subterm begins, students actually have access to their Canvas courses 10 days in advance, which is a really great time to plan out your ideal week. So just knowing, okay, what are my typical weekly assignments? When are they due? And how can I plan accordingly? A lot of classes have a discussion post due Wednesday night and then responses due by Saturday. So that's helpful to just know and to plan out in advance, okay, when am I going to do the reading for that discussion post? When am I going to write that discussion post? And when am I going to write those replies, for example? Something else that's really useful is the Minnesota University Library actually has a resource called an assignment calculator, and it can help you break down your assignments into manageable steps. So perhaps you know you have a large research paper due at the end of your term. You can put in that due date, and then it'll factor in today's date, and it'll actually provide you with steps of, okay, by this date, you should choose your topic. By this date, you should be conducting your preliminary research. And then by this date, you should have drafted your thesis statement, and so on and so forth. And so, if you have a class where maybe you don't have smaller checkpoint assignments, it can be really useful to figure out, okay, how do I stay on track so that I'm not scrambling to write this paper the weekend before it's due? And this is a screenshot of what the resource looks like. Of course, this is only part of it because the time blocks keep going, but I'll show you our Ally Center library guide where you can get this resource later on in the workshop. But this is what it looks like, and it's great because you can use different features in Word to color code different weekly consistent commitments and responsibilities. But it's a really great resource and helps students to plan out their time and stay on track. Any questions about the ideal week calendar or really anything that we've talked about so far? Okay, if there are no questions, we can keep on moving ahead. So, something else that we want to think about is our weekly structure. So, in addition to our ideal week, we also want to intentionally plan times for reflection, to reflect on the wins from the previous week. So, what went well, and any changes that you may want to make going into the following week. And it also provides a nice time to determine our top priorities for the upcoming week. So, what are the things that absolutely have to get done? What are the top priorities? Maybe even well, the top priorities, and then you can designate different days to work on those priorities. And as a reminder, as we've been talking about, this is an ongoing process. It's not something that will go perfectly every single week, but it's about consistency and showing up and continuing to improve. And something that we want to ask ourselves, which is very convicting, it's a convicting question. Did my actions line up with my priorities this past week? So if I say I want to spend so much time writing each week, and I say that I want to exercise and be active, and I want to meal prep my meals, well, did my actions this past week line up with my priorities? It's an important question for all of us to ask ourselves and consider. Something else that can be really helpful for not just students, but really anyone at any season of life is to create bookends for your day. So create some sort of morning routine that is that helps you ease into the day. So whether that is your quiet time and prayer time with the Lord and reading your Bible and eating breakfast and maybe getting outside if possible. And then in the evening, what does it look like to kind of wind down and get ready for going to bed? So is this journaling? Is this reading, stretching? What can we do to kind of bookend our days to to conclude each day in a restful way. So, continuing on with our theme of time management and accomplishing our goals this semester, something else that's going to help us do that is developing a daily plan. So, I'm sure many of us have heard the phrase, those who fail to plan to fail. And that oftentimes proves true. So, we want to make sure that we're developing a plan to help us complete our goals. Now, there are a few different ways to do this. We can create more of a time-based schedule in which we have kind of like the ideal week, we have our general map of the week of at 9 a.m. I do this, at 10 a.m. I'll do that, 11 a.m., so on and so forth. Whereas some people advocate for a top tasks daily plan where I may be interrupted, different things come up, but my top tasks and my top three priorities are A, B, and C, and by the end of the day, I will have completed A, B, and C. So it just kind of depends on one's time management strategies, one stage of life. They're not totally mutually exclusive. It's good to have top priorities and tasks in a time-based schedule. And then, of course, it's good to have some time parameters, even when looking at top tasks. But some people prefer or favor one method over the other. It's also important to break down our weekly goals into daily tasks. So when we have that weekly check-in and establish, okay, what are the main things I need to accomplish this week? Well, we're going to need to assign those to particular days and break up those tasks into manageable, actionable steps. And as a friendly reminder, daily rhythms and routines look different for every single person. So what works for one person might not work for another. What works in one season of your life may not translate to another season of your life. And that's okay. It's just about knowing what works best and what will help you in your goals, in your schoolwork, in the here and now. So when we're creating realistic and sustainable goals, we want to create goals that are specific, measurable, and flexible. Meaning, we don't want to just say, oh, this weekend I'm going to write my paper. Well, writing a paper involves a lot of different steps, and so that's pretty broad. So we want to narrow that down to be more specific, measurable, and flexible. So an example of this would be tomorrow morning and at 9 a.m., I am going to take time to revise my thesis statement. Okay, that gives me a specific actionable step. I'm going to revise my thesis statement. It's measurable. Is my thesis statement revised or not? And it's also flexible. So we know that, okay, if it doesn't happen tomorrow at 9 a.m., then my backup plan is tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. So if something comes up, I'll make sure to schedule it in a little bit later in my day. And same goes for draft one body paragraph, find and annotate three sources. These are all very specific things that are building blocks toward that larger paper. But this helps break it down into more manageable steps. So we want to create realistic and sustainable goals. So as an LBC student, you have a lot of resources available to you, and one of them is the Ally Center Library Guide. So I am going to stop my share and I'm going to share my screen with the Ally Center Library Guide resources. So we have two primary categories of our resources in the Ally Center. So I'll start with the academic mentoring resources. So these are more study strategies, time management, boundaries, stress management, listening to lectures, and those sorts of things. The really great thing is you can go in and we have different pages and resources and handouts on all of these different topics. So that's a really wonderful resource that you have. And specifically, we even have global student resources. So for our entirely 100% online student population, we have particular resources for you to explore there. And then, in addition to the academic mentoring resources, we also have a specific writing guide. So we have writing resources with researching, reading well, pre-writing, drafting, incorporating research, citing, revising, and editing. And so again, there are just a ton of resources here that are available to you and that I encourage you to check out. And the Ideal Week resource that we looked at earlier is in the academic mentoring resources side of our library guide. And something else, since we're here, that I will bring to our attention on our Ally Center page. I mean, this is our where our workshops are. So this is this is the workshop for tonight. But as you can see, we have so many exciting workshops coming up that are here to support you as LBC students. And so I encourage you to take advantage of those workshops and prioritize attending them. But of course, we also post them on our YouTube page as well. So those resources are available after the fact. But something that I did want to also highlight, there's just so many resources. Over here, you'll see that there are Ally Center study groups. And so, depending on the course that you're in, we have study groups for a lot of our foundational courses that students take as soon as their entryway courses as when they begin their studies at LBC. And those include LAN 100, LAN 101, FAS 100. And so we actually have study groups in which students meet outside of class time and have an opportunity to collaborate about their schoolwork with one of our LBC Ally Center writing consultants. And that's just a really great opportunity to talk through any questions you may have about your assignments and just to build community with other students. And then, of course, get to know uh, Ally Center writing consultants and tutors and mentors that you can meet with in study group. But then, of course, you can also schedule one-on-one appointments as well. So those are resources that are available to you. And then we will jump back over to our PowerPoint. So we went over the multitude of resources available to you in the library guide, but then something else, well, a few other resources that you also have available to you when it comes to time management. Something that works well for many students is something that's called the Pomodoro technique. And that is a time management strategy in which you set a timer for 25 minutes and work on one task during that 25 minutes. And then once that 25 minutes is completed, you'll take a 5-minute break, ideally not involving a cell phone, but maybe just making yourself a cup of tea, stepping outside, getting the mail, just something to kind of, just a very brief break from your work. And then returning again for another 25-minute session, working on one task, followed by a 5-minute break. So it's a really great way to get things done in a relatively short amount of time. So it can be really easy to feel like, oh, I have to write this whole paper. But if we break it up into, okay, in the next 25 minutes, I'm going to work on my introduction and I'm going to see how far I get. I might not complete my introduction in those 25 minutes, but I'm really going to focus on making as much progress as I can in that time and then going on from there. Something else that is relevant to this conversation and when we're talking about starting the subterm well is thinking about boundaries. So we all have a lot of responsibilities, commitments, things going on in our lives, but we need to set parameters around our time, our capacity because we are finite creatures. We are not limitless in our focus, in our energy. And so when you, as a college student, have these assignments and have these tasks that you are needing to complete, well, saying yes to one thing means saying no to something else. And so maybe at this time, you're not able to be quite as involved in a extracurricular sports activity or sports team that you really enjoy. And again, this is a season, so maybe it's just having you know, having to say no, even if it's to good things, at this time. So then you can say yes later when you have more time in your schedule and more availability. So having boundaries to protect the time that you've allocated and dedicated to your studies is really important. And then, of course, saying yes to something is saying no to something else. And so we need to figure out, okay, what are the things that I'm definitely saying yes to? And as a result, what are some of the things that I'm going to need to say no to? At this time, we might not have as much time to watch movies or be on social media, but that's a really worthwhile sacrifice when it comes to earning your degree and investing time in your education. Okay, switching gears a little bit now to talking about some academic and writing resources that are available to you. One being the Ally Center. So the Ally Center exists to support students academically, and we have a variety of services and resources that we offer students. And so we meet with students one-on-one to work on time management, on study strategies, on writing at any stage of the writing process, whether that's brainstorming, drafting, revising, editing, you name it, we are here to help with that. And then we also have ESL services for students for whom English is not their first language, and then we also have accessibility services for students with just who are looking for and needing academic accommodations. And then something else that's available to you as an LBC student is library research appointments. So we have a team of wonderful LBC librarians, and they are available to meet with you to support you in your research for your papers. And so it's really great because we have different research appointment lengths. And so if you want a shorter appointment because you just have one or two questions, or if you'd like a slightly longer appointment because you're wanting to find several different resources, you can schedule an appointment through our library website and you can meet with one of our LBC research librarians. And it's great because our librarians have availability at different times during the day. And so whatever works best for your schedule, you can find an appointment there. And then we previously discussed study groups. Study groups are available for particular courses, and it's a really great opportunity to get to know your classmates, to continue just building community and working through questions that you have about assignments or course concepts. And then, of course, your professor is there to support you and to support your learning and answer your questions. So if you have a question about something in your course or something that you're wanting to understand better about an assignment, always be sure to reach out and reach out early. So as soon as you have that question, be sure to reach out so that you can get that help in a timely manner. And then also you have your classmates, other people who are going through these academic programs that are also at seeking to learn and grow as students, as followers of Christ. And so it's really great to be able to get to know one another and encourage each other on this journey. So we are now going to switch gears. So we talked a lot about setting goals and different strategies that will help us with our writing, time management. Now I also want to spend a few moments talking about self-care. So when it comes to the self-care conversation, it can feel like there's kind of two extremes. One extreme of not wanting to emphasize self-care at all, that we should, people and from this perspective might believe that we don't want to talk about self-care or focus on self-care at all. And then there's kind of a whole other pendulum swing to the other side of we should just, of course, they wouldn't use these words, but kind of we can be selfish, we can just look out for ourselves, and anything or anyone that gets in the way of that, we'll just cut off. It's like, well, maybe we can have more of a biblical, nuanced view in which, okay, God has given us time and resources and our very lives, and we need to steward them well, and we also need to take care of ourselves. And so, what does it look like to take care of ourselves and also love and sacrifice and serve others? So, when it comes to being a student, there's a lot of demands on your time and your energy, and it's really important that you're looking out for yourself physically, emotionally, spiritually. And so, we're going to start by talking about the physical. So, starting our subterm well, we really want to focus on different practices and routines that can help support our health from a well-rounded perspective. So we want to be regularly exercising. So we want to be pursuing physical wellness and activity. And the really cool thing is God has given us so many different activities and ways that we can exercise. So some people enjoy walking, some people enjoy running, some people enjoy swimming, some people enjoy tennis or pickleball or soccer. And so it's really awesome that we have so many different avenues in which to exercise and move. And then we also really want to prioritize our sleep. And so we want to be sleeping at least 7 hours a night. I'm not a medical doctor, but from the research that I've read, it's really important that we do prioritize sleeping well and giving our brains and our bodies time to rest. And then we also want to plan out our meals. So we don't want to be scrambling at 5:30 or 6 o'clock trying to figure out what's for dinner. It's helpful to, as part of our weekly planning, that we're looking ahead to planning out, okay, what am I going to eat? When am I going to go grocery shopping? When am I going to cook? When am I going to do those dishes? So making a plan for all of those things in advance will help your weeks run so much more smoothly. And then talking about emotional self-care. So one way to do that would be through journaling. Journaling is a wonderful way to reflect on what's going on in your life at a particular time. And also it's a really great place too where you can even journal out your prayers and you can journal out what's happening, pray. And then it's also really neat because then you can look back in the future and see the way that you have grown, the way God has moved in your life. And it's just really neat to be able to look back on that. And then I also encourage students to engage in non-work related hobbies. So if you can find something that you really enjoy outside of work, outside of your studies, and really dig into that, that's just a really wonderful way to care for yourself. And then, as much as possible, of course, not all of us have the luxury of being able to do this, but as much as possible, if we're able to turn off email and work phones outside of work hours, that's really great to be able to just have that distance and have that time to, excuse me, rest and recover and just have that distance from work so that we can have rest. And then we also want to prioritize time with loved ones, friends, family, our church community. We want to take time to be surrounded by those who love us, encourage us, and build us up. And then spiritual self-care. We want to make sure that we are prioritizing spending time in the Word and in prayer, that we are in church community and being just having that accountability around us. And then as much as possible, if we can even, of course, this won't always be a possibility, but if we can kind of try to find ways to take some sort of personal retreat. So whether that's just going to a local coffee shop for a day and journaling and reflecting and looking ahead and setting goals, or if that looks more like a annual vacation with family and loved ones, just being able to have a change of scenery, a change of pace for some amount of time is just really great to reflect and check in and see growth and then look ahead to what we have coming up. So, we talked about a lot of different resources, strategies, and things. So, I'd like for us to take some time to make a plan. So, write down one key takeaway that you learned tonight that you plan to implement this week or next week into your studies or your goals. I'd love to hear kind of a key takeaway from this evening. So, what is one key takeaway that you learned tonight that you plan to implement this week or next week into your rhythms, routines?
Sorry, I was gonna type, but it was taking too long, so I'll just speak it.
Oh, no
For
worries.
me, a key takeaway um, would be learning um, how to properly manage my time according to my priorities. When you
Mhm,
said like, looking at your week, what are your priorities, how much time you spend in. For me, that is very important. Doing a job and then full-time school and then
mhm,
like a relationship and family. So
mhm,
yeah, just having my priorities in the correct order, and then really like aligning my time appropriately. Yeah.
mhm. Absolutely. Oh, wonderful. Thanks so much for sharing. Okay, well, we covered a lot of material resources, and so now we have some time for some questions. So thank you for joining tonight. Just my closing reminders are just encouraging you to just continue trying, showing up, adapting schedules as needed, and um, protecting your writing time, protecting your school time, and reaching out and asking for help early because help is available, but we need to reach out and, your professor won't know you're struggling unless you reach out and ask him or her for help. And so I just encourage you to reach out early, schedule appointments with the Ally Center as needed. And yes, just thank you so much for joining. And are there any questions?
No, none for me.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you so much for joining this evening, and feel free to reach out if any questions come up. And I hope you have a blessed rest of your evening and week. And thank you again.
Thank you. God bless. God
Yes.
bless.
God bless, Ethan. Thank you.